We can do those things like right now situations to help balance out what's going on with the heart rate. So it looks kind of like this. These are our three key players here. Parasympathetics, cardio inhibitors, sympathetics, cardio accelerators, or what's going on with our blood vessels. And one is going to be active and is going to inhibit the other two or three, or vice versa. Two is going to be active and it's going to inhibit one. However it is. So if one thing's active, it's going to suppress these other two things, whatever needs to happen. So cardio inhibitory, if we need to slow things down, we're going to suppress these things and we're going to do what we need to do, because we can't speed things up and slow them down at the same time. So one's going to take the lead and take over. So these are the players that we have involved with short-term blood pressure control. We can regulate it. And how do we do that? How do they know when to do that? Is we have baroreceptors. We've talked about these before. We have our thermoreceptors for temperature, chemoreceptors for the chemistry, mechanoreceptors for touch and pressure, photoreceptors for sight. Baroreceptors are the ones that are monitoring stretch, whether that be in our lungs or in our vessels. So we have them in our carotid arteries in our neck. I looked at that last week. So baroreceptors live in our neck and they're monitoring what is the flow in that vessel. Do we need to stretch or do we need to constrict? What is going on here? They're going to receive that message of if they're stretched out, they're vasodilated. If they're shrinking, they're vasoconstricting. So those receptors are monitoring the blood vessels just by stretch. What's going on in the neck? And this is why when we sit down or stand up, we get that kind of fuzzy feeling sometimes, is we got to try to get those receptors to come on board and recognize what we're doing. And we move quickly and they have to respond to that. So sometimes you get that like, whoa, stood up too fast kind of feeling. So if you stand or sit or stand up too quickly, your blood pressure falls. That's the neuroresponse. And then we're going to baseline you out again. We're going to reestablish a normal. So when we go from laying down to sitting up, we have that pressure change, we have that whole fluid dynamic thing going on there, and then the body has to respond to that. And as we get older, our nervous system doesn't respond as quickly, so we see this happen often in the elderly. Just simply wear and tear on the system. It's not anything wrong, it's just that's how it is. You get busy when you go from that, unless you sitting to standing or laying to standing situation. And when you're doing that, we have to pump that blood up to the brain and get that message out. So sometimes it just doesn't keep up with us that quickly. And then we have the receptors in our neck trying to keep in line with that. And also in the arch of the aorta, they're responding to the stretch. So sudden increases in stroke volume, our blood pressure is going to pop right up there, and then neural responses are going to say, well, wait a second, you need to calm back down. We don't need to get that excited. And then it'll monitor everything and bring it back down. So those are the receptors inside the blood vessels. Carotid arteries in our neck and the arch of the aorta. They're responding to sudden changes going through those vessels, whether it be vasoconstriction or vasodilation, and we get that lightheaded feeling. So here's our homeostasis chart. Is the brain is going to talk to the heart, and we're going to do something with the blood vessel. We're either going to vasodilate it, get flow going, deliver oxygen. Here's our receptors in the carotid arteries, and they're going to receive that message. They're going to send it to the brain. The brain's going to talk to the heart. We're going to regulate that by vasodilating, and then we're going to bring pressure back up. Or the opposite is going to happen. Same thing, receptors in the neck and the arch of the aorta are going to send the message to the brain and tell the heart what to do. We're going to do it by vasoconstricting, and we're going to bring that pressure back up. Here we're bringing pressure down. Here we're bringing pressure up. Whatever we need to do, but how we're doing it, or we're receiving that message. So that's that same old reflex arc. We have to have a stimulus. The receptor picks it up, sends it to the brain, and some kind of motor output. The motor output in this chapter is vasodilation, and then lower the pressure or vasoconstriction and raise the pressure. So same old reflex arc, same old feedback system. We've talked about it for chapters now. We're just talking to vessels, and how we talk to them are through those baroreceptors. Questions over that?
when you run and you feel it in your neck,
Mhm.
is because of that receptor.
And then that's your cardiac output, you're just pushing more volume, so you can feel it, or in your head, sometimes you feel it pulsing in there. That's the body saying, more flow, vasodilate, get more flow going. So you're trying to deliver more oxygen to the tissues, the brain's demanding more, skeletal muscles demanding more. Yeah, so you're feeling that pulsing, and we know it's in the arteries because we feel pulsing. Veins don't pulse, it's arteries. That's that whole, give me more. I have more demand, I need more supply. All right, so we also have chemoreceptors talking to the nervous system. Not only do we want to monitor blood pressure, but we also need to monitor the chemistry going on in our body. And the key players there, oxygen and carbon dioxide, and pH. So we have chemoreceptors again in our neck, in the arteries in our neck. We know we have those cardioexcitatory things going on. So positive chemoreceptors, let's see, oxygen levels or pH levels drop, either one, whatever happens, not a good thing. So our O2 level goes down, the chemoreceptors in the neck say, uh-oh, chemo, we're monitoring the chemistry, and the chemistry here would be oxygen. It says, uh-oh, CO2 levels dropping, or pH levels dropping. And the cardioreceptors, the baroreceptors are like, uh-oh, things are dropping. We need to start increasing. We need to get some more flow going in there. And so we're going to do whatever we need to do to either bring up those levels or bring down those levels. We're going to vasoconstrict if we need to hold on to it. We're going to vasodilate if we need to get rid of it. So the chemistry has to get monitored too. Those are chemoreceptors. But again, the vessels are going to help us deal with it. They're going to vasoconstrict or they're going to vasodilate. And those cardioreceptors in the heart, remember the heart's the pump, so we got to talk to it and tell it, what do you want to do? Do you want to speed it up? Cardioacceleratory, sympathetics, or do you want to slow it down? Cardioinhibitory, parasympathetics. So everything's working together. The nervous system is talking to the heart, and how it's talking to the heart is through the blood vessels, and we're going to vasoconstrict or dilate. So that's that whole idea of every organ system is independent, but they all work together. So if the heart quits working, none of this is going to happen anymore. The brain can talk to it all at once, and the vessels can vasodilate and constrict all they want, but if the heart is not pumping that blood, that doesn't matter because there's nothing getting delivered. Or if the brain doesn't tell us what to do, it doesn't matter because there's nothing getting delivered. Or if the vessels aren't vasoconstricting and dilating, we don't have a way to stay in homeostasis. So everything relies on each other. And each thing is its own independent thing. The receptors are the nervous system, the vasodilation and constriction are the blood vessels, and how we're moving everything is through the heart. So everything has its purpose, but they all have to work together. So we're going to move the blood faster to get more CO2 to the tissues because it's dropping. We want to get rid of CO2. We want to hold on to O2, oxygen, and we want to get rid of CO2. And then our blood pressures, or pH is going to rise. So we'll do a fun lab with this, I don't know, at the end of the month, I guess it is. And we'll go through and we'll do some different demonstrations. So I kind of wish we could do the lab a little bit sooner because it makes a lot of sense when you can see it happen in lab. But what happens is carbon dioxide is an acid. So if we're dealing with the pH in this situation, we understand the need for oxygen. That's pretty inherent and innate. But pH, we're like, I don't really know. It has to be around 7, but I don't really know what's going on with pH in our body. So carbon dioxide is considered an acid in our body. And our pH needs to be at 7.3 to 7.45. And if we get out of narrow ranges of that, bad things happen. We're going to have seizures or we're going to go into a coma. And we can't get very far out of that range at all before those things happen. So again, the chemoreceptors are monitoring the pH and they say, oh, our pH level is dropping. So the chemoreceptors are picking that up and sending it up to the brain. They're like, we need to do something. And so what the body does to deal with pH, it says, okay, well, oxygen levels are dropping, acids are getting out of balance, pH is out of balance. So we hold on to CO2, and CO2 is an acid. So whatever's going to happen with pH is we're going to look at CO2. And if we're dropping, if our pH is getting low, we have too much acid in our body, that's not good. So then the brain says, well, how can we regulate this? And it says, well, CO2 is an easy way to regulate pH. And if our acid is accumulating, pH is dropping, we got to get rid of that. So we'll increase respiration. We'll start blowing off the acid, and that acid is CO2. So we'll speed up our breathing. So again, a cardio-accelerory thing. Sympathetics come on board. We're going to speed things up. We're going to blow off carbon dioxide. Or if pH gets too high, we're getting in the basic range. We don't have enough acid. The body's like, oh no, we're out of range again. The body says, well, pH is getting too high. We're getting up to 8. We can't exist at pH of 8. So it says, how are we going to regulate this? How are we going to bring it back to neutral? CO2 is an acid, so it says, let's hold on to that and bring it back down. So we're going to slow down your breathing, and we're going to hold on to CO2, and we're going to bring it back down. So same situation, whether it's our chemoreceptors for oxygen, for pH, for CO2, is we're always trying to stay in homeostasis, and we have ways of doing that. One way is vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Another way is to speed up the heart or slow down the heart. Another way is to speed up the breathing or slow down the breathing. So we're always in that negative feedback system. Whatever's going wrong, we're going to do the opposite of it, and that's how we're going to talk to it. Doesn't matter who it is, we're just going to pick the most efficient thing at the time to talk to and see if we can get you back into homeostasis. So we have chemoreceptors to help us notice if these things are out of balance. We're still going to talk to the heart. We're still going to talk to the vessels to deal with the situation, but that's what's going to happen all the time, all the time. Some kind of stimulus, some message to the brain, some kind of motor response. So same old story over and over and over again. Short term, what chemicals are going to help us controlling with our blood pressure? Well, we know epi-norepinephrine, that's our powerful vasoconstrictor. So if we get into a situation where our blood pressure is out of control, or we're going into a shock situation, where vasodilating, blood pressure is falling, then we have to give you epinephrine right now, and you're going to go extreme vasoconstriction, and your blood pressure is going to come back up. So that's usually that's a crisis situation there. How we're going to handle it is blood pressure is dropping very, very, very quickly, and we can't have that, because if there's no pressure, there's no flow. If there's no flow, there's no oxygen, and tissues are going to die. So if we go into like a shock situation because you're frightened or hurt or whatever the situation may be, an allergy, you're having anaphylactic shock, and blood pressure is falling, 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 flow is falling, 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 blood pressure is falling, blood flow is falling, you're about ready to die, inject the EpiPen, vasoconstrict, pressure constricts, flow goes right up again. So we bring you back into homeostasis. So that's why you carry an EpiPen if you have a known allergy, because it can happen within 2 to 4 minutes. It's that quick. Everything extreme vasodilation. Your whole body vasodilates. There's no pressure, so there's no flow. So that's a life-threatening situation. These other 3 short-term chemicals, these are all vasodilators. So the opposite is our blood pressure is too high. We've got to get that pressure vasodilated. We've got to get those blood vessels vasodilated and get that pressure back down. So nitric oxide is our most powerful vasodilator. And guess where they use this drug? Guess what medication we put nitric oxide in? It's the key ingredient. Erectile dysfunction. Oh, yeah. So what's an erection all about? Blood flow, vasodilation. So if there's not good blood flow, if you're not vasodilating, they can't get or keep the erection. We know the commercial, right? So you take your little blue pill and you get vasodilation, you have blood flow, and you're back in business. So what does the commercial always say? If your erection lasts longer than 4 hours, seek immediate medical attention. We're like, what's the problem? The problem is we have vasodilation for too long, and then we get back into this situation. Vasodilation, blood pressure is going to start to fall, and it's been there for a long time, so we can't stay in a state of vasodilation, we gotta bring it back up. So that's the danger. But that's the key ingredient in whatever Cialis, whatever all the different little pills are, is always nitric oxide. That's the key ingredient in it. So sometimes they can get the erection, but it doesn't stay blood doesn't continue flowing. So it's not a matter of getting the erection, it's a matter of maintaining it. So this will fix either problem. The thing that happens is we have vasodilation. So we're not just vasodilating the vessels to the penis, everywhere is vasodilating. So what will happen is they'll get real stuffy sounding. And like when you get a cold and your nose will start flowing because we vasodilated, we've opened everything. So you'll get stuffy, your nose will start running, you're like, well, what's going on? Why you sound so stuffy? So you always have to warn the patient because they think they're having a bad reaction. You're like, no, that's what happens. We're not just vasodilating the penis, we're vasodilating everything. So you're going to feel like you have a cold because your head is going to be vasodilated as well. And so then you're like, oh, okay. So once you forget to tell somebody and they call you and they're like, oh my gosh, they had a bad reaction, you're like, oh yeah, no, well obviously that's going to happen. Well, to the non-medical person, that's not obvious at all. But you're like, well, it's a vasodilator. You're vasodilating everything, not just that one part. And they're like, oh, okay. Okay, keep note to self. Remember to tell patients this will happen when you take the drug.
So, question, patients that are on blood pressure medication, would they necessarily need those?
Yeah, so then you have to monitor what's going on with that, because when you have a bad cold and you have high blood pressure, you can't take anything, right?
Right.
So what are you doing messing around with ED drugs? You have to be really careful in that situation.
They normally don't let patients that have ED take, or if they have blood pressure medications they're on, they don't let them take medication for ED,
Right. Because, yeah, then you're just playing fire at that point. Now, so that's the key thing is vasoconstriction, vasodilation. Whatever we're going to do, we're going to do it to the whole body. We're not just vasodilating that one part. Alcohol, we know, is a vasodilator because what happens to your face when you drink? You get flushed, right? So we know blood is coming to the surface. So you can always tell somebody's like, you've been drinking? No, sir. Really? Your face looks like you've been drinking. So vasodilation, blood volume's going to go down, and the whole story about ADH, antidiuretic hormone, we talked about that, how when you're drinking, you put volumes in, so you're peeing volumes out. That's normal physics, volumes in, volumes out. But alcohol inhibits ADH, and ADH is the one that says, well, you're going to the bathroom too much, hold on to it, and alcohol completely blocks that. So you're just going to keep on peeing and peeing and peeing. So you're going to lose volume, you're going to lose pressure with vasodilators. Histamines, those are powerful vasodilators, so everything is going to open up again. That's why our eyes are watering, we get congested, our nose is dripping. So when we get a histamine storm, which white blood cell is that? Histamines. Basophils. Good job. So when something's irritating us, pollen, cats, dogs, whatever it might be, comes on board and your body's like, this is a pathogen, it doesn't belong, and basophils start storming your body with histamines, and everything starts flowing. Because we're opening up everything, it's a vasodilator, and we're trying to push that pathogen out, whether it be ragweed or whatever your grass, whatever your allergy is. Your body sees that as a foreign invader and says, you need to get this out. So it's going to vasodilate and try to flood it out of your body. And then you take an antihistamine so that you can survive and you can get through the day without blowing your nose 20 times or your eyes aren't watering or whatever it might be. But all of these are vasodilators, so we're opening flow. When we do that, we don't have much pressure, so our flow is going to drop, or our flow is going to drop, and our blood pressure is going to follow along with it, and then bad things can happen. The opposite, epinephrine, that's the only vasoconstrictor. So different drugs that are going to affect us. And so we talk about blood pressure medication. You have to be careful when you're on blood pressure medication to watch other things you might be taking. So if you're having allergy issues, you want to monitor what is going on with my allergy meds. So make sure you're not commingling things that are going to cause you more problems. So monitoring things like that. And when you get a bad cold, if you're on blood pressure medications, I think it's chlorocine, is that the one? Yeah, the one with the big C on it. And that's like the only safe thing to take when you're on blood pressure medication. So monitor those things. All right, those are short-term controls. What about long-term control? So then we move into the renal system. Now we're talking about the kidneys. And this is long-term because it takes a little while to go through the kidneys. We have to get filtered and processed, so it takes a little bit longer. We're not just vasoconstricting and dilating, or we're not just sending a message from the brain to the heart, say speed up or slow down. Those are our short-term fixes. Now we're going to go through the kidneys, and we said, okay, we told you to speed up or slow down, or we've dealt with our short-term issues. So now let's go and see if we can fix the problem. So the kidneys are going to start to filter and figure out what the problem is. And we have two ways, direct or indirect control. So pressure diuresis, we've heard that word before. It's all about pressure. If we don't have pressure, we don't have flow. So we're in the renal system, in the kidneys. And let's say we still have the same scenarios, but now we're going to a long-term control mechanism instead of that short-term increase or decrease the heart rate or vasoconstrictor dilating. So now we're trying to fix the problem. We're going to talk to the kidneys and say there's something going on, let's see if we can fix this problem. So blood pressure or blood volume is too high, and the easy way, if we have lots of volume, that's going to increase our pressure, right? Because increased fluids, increased pressure, no problem, we'll just start peeing off fluids, right? So the kidneys say, let's just push the fluids off. That's what we need to do. When we do that, we're going to lower our blood pressure because we're lowering our blood volume. So volumes come down, pressure comes down. And how we do that is the sympathetic nervous systems are going to vasodilate, making it easier to get fluid out. And then we're going to go back into homeostasis. So we're going to use the kidneys to help get rid of something. The sympathetics are still vasodilating, but they're going to help push, they're going to give a big opening so we can push fluids out. So the kidneys can do that. Opposite, blood pressure is too low. We say, whoa, volumes are low, our pressure's low, which means our volume's low. So let's start holding on to fluids. And when we can accumulate fluids, we're going to bring volume up, we're going to bring pressure back up. And how we're going to do that is we're going to vasoconstrict because we want to hold on to fluids. We got a little opening, so there's going to be a little bit of flow. So we want to hold on to stuff, and how we're going to do that is by vasoconstricting. The kidneys are going to hold on to fluid, we're going to get off, volumes are going to go back up, pressure is going to go back up. So we're going to regulate your urine output, and that's our direct long-term control
Is that
system.
why there's a lot of blood pressure?
Yes.
To get out?
Yeah. So that's the term pressure diuresis. And what we're doing is what kind of flow do we want? We're monitoring pressure, we've got to do something with our pressure. How is that going to affect our flow? So again, we're still vasoconstricting or dilating is what we're doing. If we're vasoconstricting, we're going to bring up our pressure and we're going to bring up our flow. If we're vasodilating, we're going to open things up, pressure is going to go down, flow is going to come off, pressure is going to go down, and balance everything. So it always keeps coming back to this situation, and just think in your head, are we vasoconstricting, holding on, or are we vasodilating, letting go? Whatever is going on, it's always about that. If we're vasodilating, there's going to be low pressure. If we're vasoconstricting, there's going to be high pressure. So just get that mental picture. I know it gets confusing. You're like, I don't know what we talked about. Pressure and flow resistance, but when you think about it in your head, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So the kidneys are pushing off fluid, or the kidneys are holding on fluid. One or the other. All right, then we have an indirect way, which gets more complicated, and this is the way of chemistry. So now we're going to regulate flow, urine flow, based on the chemistry that's going on in our kidneys. So we've touched on this a little bit before, and it's that whole idea of these key things of renin and angiotensin. And they're going to talk to each other, and then they're going to convert things, and they're going to say either hold on to water or release water. So this is the main thing, is renin and angiotensin are the kickers that are going to say hold on to fluids or push off fluids. So here we go again, if blood pressure is too low, we want to increase blood pressure by increasing volume. So pressure's low, meaning volumes are low. So we have to somehow get volume back up. And we're going to do that through chemistry, and it's the kidneys that are going to control these hormones, renin and angiotensin. So here's what the kidneys are going to do. It's going to say blood pressure is low. We're like, uh-oh, low blood pressure. We know that means low volume. So the kidneys are going to say, well, let's start doing our chemistry thing. We're going to secrete angiotensin, or secrete renin. And renin is the first thing that comes out, and it converts to angiotensin. And angiotensin gets converted to angiotensin 2. So it's just this domino effect, just like we were talking about in the endocrine system, where the pituitary talks to the hypothalamus, and the thalamus talks to the hypothalamus, which talks to the pituitary, that cascading effect. Same thing happens in the kidneys. It starts off with renin, and renin talks to angiotensin, and angiotensin 1 then gets converted into angiotensin 2. That's just the process. So just memorize renin, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2. It's the process of getting to where we need to go. So angiotensin is what we're trying to get to, but first we have to kick that off. The kidneys secrete renin, that goes to angiotensin 1, that goes to angiotensin 2. Now we're where we need to be, trying to get to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is a strong vasoconstrictor. If our blood pressure is low, we need to constrict and get it back up again. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to release angiotensin. So it's a strong vasoconstrictor. Blood pressure is going to go up. How angiotensin 2 does that is it stimulates aldosterone. That's coming from our adrenal cortex up on top of our kidneys. And ADH. So these are two things that are going to talk to the body, and they say hold on to fluids. And aldosterone increases sodium. And we know wherever sodium goes, water goes. So if we're going to increase volumes, if our blood pressure is low, we need to get volumes up, we need to get fluids up, and bring it back up. So the whole story is the kidneys are trying to do this chemical symphony to try to get everything up. What we're trying to do is hold on to fluids. But the way we do it is a pretty complicated chemistry. The first thing we do is we secrete renin. That converts it to angiotensin 1, converts it to angiotensin 2. So we're where we need to be. What angiotensin 2 is trying to do is say, hold on to water. And how it does that is it talks to this guy called aldosterone. And it says, when angiotensin comes on board, its message is let's vasoconstrict and hold on to stuff. It has to have the help of aldosterone, because aldosterone says, well, if we need to bring volumes up, we need salt on board, we need sodium on board. So aldosterone is the ingredient that talks to sodium. And aldosterone, when it's present, sodium comes right on board. When sodium comes on board, water comes on board, and now our volumes are going to go up, and our pressure is going to go up. So it's this pretty long, involved chemical thing. The other thing that angiotensin does when it's finally present is it talks to ADH. And ADH is anti-diuretic hormone. It says do not pee off fluids, hold on to fluids. Volumes are low, pressure is low, we need to get some volume. So aldosterone is going to talk to sodium, and it says come on, we need you. And sodium comes on, and then water comes on. The other thing we do is ADH says, okay, well, aldosterone, you get sodium, sodium's going to bring water, volumes will go up, pressure will go up. And he says, okay, I got that. ADH says that I'll do my part, I'll talk to the body and say, don't release any more fluids, because we need to hold on to fluids. So these are kind of like the two key players. Once the angiotensin 2 gets on board, it needs these two things to help it to bring volumes back up. And then together, everybody's holding on, we're vasoconstricting, we're getting sodium on board, which means we're getting water on board, which means we're getting volumes up, and we're not peeing anything off, so whatever we're holding on to, we're going to keep, and volumes are going to come up, and pressure's going to come up. So, pretty crazy, huh? All of that stuff happens. So that's the chemistry behind what's going on there. So, it's just like the endocrine system where we have that waterfall. And this is long term. So all of these things have to do with blood pressure. The heart has to do with it. All of these, it's all about the vessels and dilating, constricting. The heart has to do with it. The brain has to do with it. And now we're getting the kidneys involved with it. So what they're going to do is they hold on to water. First step of that is kidneys. That's the first step. When that happens, it goes to angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, and angiotensin 2 talks to two things. Talks to aldosterone, it says sodium, where sodium goes, water goes. Well, that's one way to do it. That's part A. Part B says, in the meantime, while angiotensin is talking to aldosterone, and aldosterone is talking to sodium, and sodium's coming on board. In the meantime, ADH, we need your help. And ADH says hold on to. So we don't want any more fluids going off. It says hold on to what we got. In the meantime, we're going to try to build some up over here, and you hold on to what we have over here. Volume increases. And that's a lot of chemistry. That's what's going on in the kidneys part of the time. In addition to filtering and cleansing, that's another thing. So how quickly do you think we can get out of balance if the kidneys start failing? How long do you think we can last in renal failure?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. 30 minutes. Because look how hard it's working over here. It goes into crisis mode, and it's like, oh my gosh, volumes are dropping, and blood pressure is going to follow that right along. So we got to get in gear, and we got to get this whole chemistry thing going on. And if we can't filter and push things through, and we start to go into renal failure, it can go wrong in a big fast hurry. And that's usually, so when does that happen? When do we get renal failure?